this one you're going to want to stick around for. And the reason why is because I watched a awesome interview on the Polarity podcast with Josh from Polarity. I'm sure some of my viewers may be familiar with him, but if not, you're going to want to check him out. I'm going to show you a clip from Nathaniel Gillis, and I'm also going to show you an older clip from Chris Bledsoe on the Sean Ryan podcast. And the things that they're talking about kind of interlock, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is that since 2020, nothing has seemed quite the same. Something is off. And I'm not the only one that's experiencing this, right? There's the whole memories that don't line up with history that people are experiencing, synchronicities and strange occurrences in their life that just seem to not make sense, and also a quickening of time. And I feel like there's a coming, we're moving towards a point in time when I think vast truths are about to be revealed. And that's what we're going to explore tonight. So please stick with me. It's going to be a hell of a show.
There is a technology there. There are many things about this intelligence that doesn't just point to the fact that we live in a construct, but it's highly possible that it's maintaining it. And what we're looking at is some kind of intelligent life form that is a program in that it's working the environment. It's like an artificial habitat, and we are inside of it, and we only know it's artificial now because things are starting not to make sense whatsoever. Whatever we're dealing with can create physiological constructs. If it has that ability to create something that feels real, appears real, you can actually capture on radar and sonar. If it can create something like that, then whatever we're dealing with is either in control of reality or it's replicating it. And if it's replicating it, my friend, then all of ufology has to sit down with the question and say, okay, what have we actually been studying?
So right now, it's March 2026. And I feel like we're standing at like a precipice, right? And that things, it appears like there's a predetermined horizon. And the dates that keep popping up is 2026 and 2027. And Chris Bledsoe spoke of 2026, but some of the things that he said, this was back in 2012, have seemed to come true. Basically, the conflict with Iran, the drone swarm of last year, and the claims that there's going to be a new awakening on the earth this year. John Ramirez, CIA GS-15, also spoke of 2027, and he speaks of it as a contact event, a mass contact event where something is going to reveal itself to humanity, and that if they don't prepare us in the correct way, there's going to be mass panic. And these are the things that are being spoken about. And then when I watched the whole interview with Nathaniel Gillis on the Polarity podcast, he speaks of this construct that non-human intelligence, if they didn't create it, they at least manage it. And then this gets into the things at CERN. And all these things seem to be corresponding. And this is what we're getting into today. And I'm going to quote you, John Ramirez, right? His exact quote says, they are showing up because they know we're about to find out. Now, I don't know what that exactly, that's an actual quote from John Ramirez. Now, what was he speaking of there? You know, it's just a strange way to frame a sentence. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure, is he speaking of UFOs, aliens, non-human intelligence? And when you look at the whole phenomenon itself, right, I don't see it as a nuts and bolts, strictly nuts and bolts thing. But Nathaniel Gillis, he kind of is able to bring the nuts and bolts aspect with the interdimensional spiritual aspect into one cohesive theory. And I kind of agree with what he's speaking of, right? That these beings, whatever they are, have the ability to manifest into our reality physically. And they interact with us in non-physical ways. they're able to somehow take us out of our bodies, take us up, do various things to us, leave physical scoop marks and evidence. And you hear about this repeatedly in these abduction situations. He actually speaks of sigils being on the inside of people's eyelids after an abduction experience. Sigils, right? And this is the things that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Matthew Brown. I did an episode about him. He was the whistleblower that I believe authored the document Immaculate Constellation. He worked at the Pentagon, and got into a server where he saw a lot of things. And he has an X account, and on the X account, he is Son of Abramelin, which is really an occult name in and of itself. This is like angel magic, right? And this is a UFO whistleblower that worked at the Pentagon, right? And I'm going to show you a clip from the Weaponized podcast of Matthew Brown. And so you look at this convergence between spirituality, the interdimensional aspect of UFOs, and the nuts and bolts. And I feel like we're getting a cohesive picture of what the phenomenon may be. And that's the whole point of this, right? I can sit here all day and just, do historical cases and, and sit here and say, hey, it's real, and keep trying to reveal the fact that the phenomenon is real. But if we don't get to the bottom of what it is, what the purpose is, and what their motivations are, I think that we're just going to be chasing our tail. So that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're doing. So stay tuned. What I believe John Ramirez was getting at in that interview where he was speaking about 2027, he kind of was, he argues that there's a socialization program going on, right? Where they're trying to get us acclimated to this fact that we're not alone, that there's another higher intelligence on this planet with us, sharing the planet with us. And that they have to get us acclimated to this before 2027, or there's going to be an ontological shock. And that this is what the push was in 2017 with Lou Elizondo to the Stars Academy, and since 2020. And I feel like it's been revealing itself more and more since 2020. And if you just research and just look around, or if you just pay attention, more and more people are experiencing strange occurrences. I actually saw a comment on one of the, it was the show with Sean Ryan and Chris Bledsoe, and a woman was on there saying, listen, and this one comment had like 2,000 replies, because this woman was saying that, look, call me crazy, but something hasn't been the same since 2020. She said she sees messages and TV shows, movies, in her environment, numbers keep popping up, synchronicities keep happening. And this is some of the things that I've been talking about in past shows. So what are we dealing with? And I think that this catastrophic disclosure that the government fears is about the floodgates are about to open. And this is why Trump and Hegseth recently doubled down on Trump's claim to get to the bottom of these files and reveal them to the public. And you see that there's some kind of panic right now, almost, with this conflict with Iran. It's almost like they're up against the clock. They're trying to do something before this happens. What that is, I'm not sure. And I'm sure it's all related to the missing General William Neal McCaslin. If you just look at, there's been physicists who have came up missing in 2025 related to these advanced technologies that William Neal McCaslin was overseeing at Wright Pat Air Force Base, Kirkland, and others. So what are they so worried about getting out to the public? This is the question that I'm trying to answer. And what do these entities actually want? And I think it's like anything. There's a polarity. There's good and there's evil, right?
take a piece of paper, bend it like this. So you had a pencil, you could poke a hole right through. So you can go from point A to point B. Instead of traveling over the length of that sheet of paper.
I ran. You were right the whole time. She showed me other things. When the star of Regulus is red on the horizon in front of the gaze of the Sphinx before daylight, that moment would mark a change in humanity's knowledge. They took that celestial event and ran it through these machines that showed that exact alignment will happen in 2026 at Easter.
What will happen?
When the suffering of man comes too great, they're going to stop it. They're going to snuff out the darkness.
Where do you think you were for the hours that you disappeared during the incident in 2007?
Well, I can tell you I had no clue until 2008 when MUFON came and did the Discovery Show. They actually sent a guy from a Harvard-trained psychiatrist that does hypnosis, and he hypnotized me first to say we're removing this block. And then we're going to come back next week and find out what happens. So he did the first one. And immediately I could think about it and not pass out or have an excruciating headache. So what he did worked. And then my wife and kids started for the next, it was about 2 weeks before they came. They were startled because when I'd go to bed, which always went pretty early, they'd be up till late. I'd be yelling out in my sleep and screaming and talking, and they were in there filming me with cell phones and iPads while I'm doing this, saying stuff, weird stuff, like seeing beings and on Mars and all kinds of weird stuff. So eventually I began to remember some of what happened, not all, but what I can tell you, the 4 hours while I was gone was a virtual tour. I was inside a bubble, something that was solid that I could stand on, but I couldn't see the walls, but I could touch them. But I could see everything in every direction. And there were always 3 figures behind me that were shadowy, and they were narrating what I was seeing. And I saw North America from way up high. I saw the whole United States. And then I was taken to Egypt. And I saw the pyramids. And this Hathor's temple. I saw that, the Sphinx facing to the east. And then the lady comes back. The following year, after all this, this was in 2013 is when I really got that message from her, because that's when I was asked by the Pentagon, by 2 Air Force generals, to put it in writing what she told me. And I did. And this was on the request from NASA, a friend at NASA. So he come and got it and hand-delivered it to these generals. And she told me that, she said that when the star of Regulus, she called it a red star. When you look at it, it looks blue. But she said when Regulus is red on the horizon in front of the gaze of the Sphinx before daylight. So in other words, when it's sitting right on top of the horizon before the sun comes up, that moment would mark a change in humanity's knowledge.
And the thing about Nathaniel Gillis and Chris Bledsoe that I found so interesting was how they kind of both speak of this, that the NHI have been managing us in this construct, right? That these ancient stories and biblical stories and myths are actually allegories, right? That these beings, whatever they are managing the construct, right? And you look at the experiments at CERN, and there's been video of some crazy rituals at CERN. There's a statue of, I believe, Vishnu, a Hindu god at CERN. And it's just really strange that this scientific, Large Hadron Collider, where they're colliding these particles to see how the universe came into existence, is doing these rituals. Like, what does that have to do with, particle physics? And then that woman came out, and I may try to find that clip and play it for you guys, but that woman was talking about that they were opening portals and that beings were coming through the portals at CERN. And Nathaniel Gillis gets into some of that too. And I think they're playing with things that they just don't understand. And did they do something? Did they open something that it didn't mean to open and it's affected our reality? And I think that that could be the case because since 2020, things have been really weird. Time just doesn't seem like it's going at the same pace that it used to. It seems like there's been this quickening. The days seem shorter. Like things just seem strange. And Terrence McKenna, you know, has said as much. You know, he was living in the jungles, taking mushrooms, like, you know, really a very, very brilliant mind. And he said that he predicted some of these things back in the 90s that there would be AI, that we would have it contact with extraterrestrials, open contact, and that things would get so strange that we would have to start talking about how strange things were. So, are we living in some type of simulated reality that's managed by higher intelligences? And it's wild. And there's been evidence that this could be the case. One thing that Chris Bledsoe did say, right? And I found it fascinating. He said that when things become the darkest, right? When the times we're living in become really dark, that the lady and this host is going to come back and take away the darkness, and we're going to exist with them, right? This is what Chris Bledsoe believes. Now it's far out, you know. Yeah, there's some religious connotations in that. I would like to think that that would be possible, but who knows? What are we going to have to go through to get to that point is the question. And you see a lot of the things that are happening right now with the Epstein files, with, you know, General Neil McCaslin going missing, with the conflicts, with the massive inflation, with a lot of the struggles that the common man are suffering right now. How dark is it going to have to get is the question. And I think you look at those files and they made me sick to my stomach. You know, are these elites in contact with some very diabolical things that they just don't understand? Maybe they're getting a benefit from these beings for being managed. Like if our reality, right? If this reality, and CERN did a actual experiment. There's been papers that they produced on this lattice structure when they got down to the smallest building blocks of reality, and they tried to, you know, figure out what happened at the Big Bang. They came across this lattice structure that they think may have spawned our reality. Now it's way above my head when the physics of it, but this is the things that they're speaking about. So what is this lattice structure? And is it proof that we're living in a simulated reality? One of the experiments they did, they found that there was different results if there was people in the room observing the experiment. So if we're being managed, who or what is managing us? So Nathaniel Gillis's theory is that this is like a farm, right? And it's like a simulation, a construct that these entities are managing. That they're, maybe they didn't create it, but they're definitely managing it. But why? What are they getting from us? What benefit? If it's a farm, what are they farming? Is the question. And he claims it could be a capture system for human consciousness. And this brings me back, it makes me think of Bob Monroe. Bob Monroe was the gentleman who started the Gateway process, right? The Monroe Institute. And it was basically a way to experience out of body experiences, remote viewing, this type of thing, right? And he created this gateway process to open the mind up to these other realities. And he spoke of something called loosh, right? And it was basically that these entities feed off of our negative emotions. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because you look at the world and just our history and just all the huge destructive wars and just massive cruelty and violence and just negative emotions. Is that what they're farming? And if you think about like Gillis and this CERN discovery, this lattice discovery, are we accidentally poking holes in the walls of our own prison? And I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Courtney Brown and Farsight, but he's actually a professor at a university, and Farsight is this remote viewing group that claims they have like psychic meetings with aliens and that there's good ones and bad ones and that this is a prison planet. And I used to think like, maybe that's a little too far out for me as a theory. But the more and more that I look into this subject and really research and drill down into it, the more and more it's appearing that he might be right. So between this supposed statutory declassification, this disclosure that's going to happen before 2027, Chris Bledsoe's prediction of the star Regulus in 2026, and the anomalies at CERN and the claimed portals, the narrative is converging. Whether it's a genetic upgrade, a simulated reset possibly, or a spiritual harvest, the management is becoming visible. And I have to agree. So I want you guys to stay vigilant because the construct is cracking. The evidence is all around us. This is UAP Truth 33. Till tomorrow. Oh, share it to a friend. Share it to 2 friends. See you tomorrow. Peace.